my support. Happy New Year, everybody. This reading is interesting in that it's the first Sunday of the new year, and Swami chose these readings sequentially throughout the year. And this one is interesting because if you look at the other books in the Bible, for example, Luke talked about the actual physical birth of Jesus. But St. John, which was quoted today in the reading, talks about the birth of Christ as it relates to creation and as it relates to, as Jesus said, God the Father. So God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But in this particular case, how vibration and energy is the essence. These are really very, very deep teachings, because behind the energy of the universe is God the Father, or ever-existing consciousness. And that's what makes these teachings so incredibly, not only, I don't like the word modern, but the teachings are current, because now we know that what Jesus taught really also is true physically, mentally, spiritually, but that it is also true on the level of creation. It's an illusory, or a creation is like made of dream fabric, and science knows it. So I wanted to use, I want to go step by step this morning, and let's explore this word that was talked about today, the holy vibration and the Spirit of God that is behind it. So this first sentence even is very interesting. Life is pre-existent in eternity. So in eternity there is no time. In fact, in eternity there is no vibration. Again, unique to these teachings in a way is that the masters teach that God or Spirit is unmanifested behind the vibratory manifestation of this creation. So life itself, the way that is described in the Bible and the way that the masters describe it, can be defined as cosmic energy. Because now we know that from the center, like a tuning fork or like vibration, always vibrates from a center. So God is that unmanifested center, and all of this creation manifests from a vibration from a still center. So that cosmic energy is pre-existent in eternity. From vibration came the thoughts and energy forms of everything that we see in the universe. I want to just emphasize that from vibration came thoughts and all the forms we see manifested in the universe. We know that. In fact, you'll hear it in the Festival of Light, that creation is a manifestation of divine energy. Life always is an outward radiation from a core of conscious vibration. So even in the atom, there's the still center, and then everything vibrates outward from the center. Swami used to like to describe, if you notice in nature, everything has a center. A tree, a stalk of grass, all animals, fish, has this center. And from there, the nervous system radiates outward. Or in the case of a tree, life. The tree's form radiates outward from that center. Both life and consciousness await manifestation at the heart of the atom. Both the cosmic energy and consciousness await fulfillment in the spiritual development of humans. That's a very interesting comment, because what the masters teach is that this whole creation actually is for our growth and for our benefit, for the evolution of human beings. It's actually the evolution of all life, from the atom to the mineral kingdom, to the plant kingdom, to the animal kingdom. But we're the top. Human beings have this very refined nervous system that allows our self-awareness to self-reflect. Now this is an interesting term. Swami says, understanding is self-discovery. We go to school, we go to university, and we concentrate a lot on understanding things rationally. But self-discovery is experiential. That's why we have this separation between science and spirituality, is because science is based in rational findings or rational discoveries, things that can be proved. Self-discovery is experiential. The source of God and ourselves is at the wellspring of every thought. That's very interesting. So even behind thought, right before thought, is where our essence is, and that's where the essence of God is. Inwardness is a process of tracing every thought back to its source. Where do our thoughts come from? We're like this receiving station. And if we don't learn to control the thoughts, then often our minds are just swirling with anything that basically is in the ether that we allow to enter, a little bit like a radio or different radio stations. But the essence of you and me is right where thought begins. Now this is very interesting because, and I want to emphasize this, true life is much more than existence. It is intense awareness of our existence. Remember that Jesus said, I have come to give you life and give it abundantly. Intense awareness. Remember, in the festival that you will hear after this, remember there's the part of the festival that talks about self-awareness coming up through dim corridors of awakening, finally to arrive at infinite light, infinite consciousness. And that's the difference, is the dim awareness of self-awareness. A horse or a dog has a certain degree of self-awareness, but we have the nervous system to where we can achieve intense awareness of our existence. And that is part of the challenge of finding the Christ, of listening to Om, to feeling or experiencing the Word, is to develop not just a passive awareness, but intense awareness of our existence. Divine consciousness is the true life that enlightens human minds. God is perceived directly by the soul through the sound of Om or Amen. Om and Amen manifest in creation as the calm inner light. So that calm inner light is part of what was born the moment Spirit moved and God said, "Let there be light." It's easy to miss the connection because we're talking about creation, but we're talking about a conscious spirit manifesting creation, and therefore that light is a manifestation of consciousness that you and I can also experience. So Swami says, thus have great saints communed with the Word, or that vibration. Communed with that cosmic light. Our ability to see the inner light depends on how we tune into it. Now this is another sentence that's very, very interesting. The light is always with us. The light is right there. The very fact that I don't see it is because I don't know how to tune in to it. Plain and simple, that is why we have spiritual practices. That's why we work at training the mind. That is why we try to learn to control the thought process, because that light, or the presence of God in the Word, is right where thoughts begin. The light is always with us when the soul realizes its oneness with Christ consciousness. It perceives its deeper reality as the state of oneness with the remote, seemingly remote and watchful state of the Father beyond creation. To me, that's thrilling, but we have to go back a little bit to what that means. The watchful state of the Father. Yogananda explained it this way, that on the one side, God exists in His home of infinity, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. On that same side, so do we. We're the soul, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss, individualized. That watchful state. Remember the eulogy of Jnanamata, where Yogananda said, I watched her slip into the watchful state. A very high soul to actually leave this body and go into cosmic consciousness, one with the Father. In fact, Yogananda said that even the watchful state does not define spirit or cosmic consciousness. The only thing that he said the only thing that can define the consciousness that is capable of manifesting the universe, of all the intricacies, the sun and the moons, and look at just this one life on this earth, the vastness down to the infinite level or existence of the atom. Just in this one planet, the greatness of this spirit to manifest out of his consciousness, the ideas and the essence, the individuality, the ingenious creativity and beauty and the physics, the math. I mean, it's just so incredible. But his creation doesn't define him. Just like our ideas or our thoughts don't define us. Yogananda said the only thing that we can really define this watchful state, this presence behind creation, is ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. Bliss is the only thing that defines cosmic consciousness. He said every other name limits spirit, limits God, because it puts a concept or puts an idea to try to encapsulate him, and he is everything. Jesus said that if you want to know the Father, you must come through me, through Christ consciousness. Again, it's helpful to use Yogananda's explanation. On the one side, that watchful spirit is in its home of infinity. On the other side, he is dreaming this creation. All the intricacies of this creation. But Yogananda said he knows he's dreaming. It's not an unconscious dream. He's in every part. So you have the spirit that Genesis says existed in the book of Genesis. That spirit moved, and there was light. But that light is also conscious vibration, conscious light, conscious energy. And from that light, duality and all of existence has come into place. The distinction that's important to make is that at the heart of every atom is the Christ. It is God's idea of creation, it is God's thought of creation, but it is also still unmoving consciousness, just like this side over here. God behind creation, God in creation is static, is unmoving, but from that static idea of creation, Spirit moved. Christ is at the heart of every atom of creation, divine presence. The interesting thing I want to emphasize is that Yogananda said, Spirit exists whether the universe does or does not exist. So creation is a manifestation of God's Spirit. Now, this is where it's very interesting. In the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna states that the manifested universe is Spirit's lower aspect. Its higher aspect is the true self of all beings. So it's not even really about his creation. His higher aspect is that this Spirit on this side was able to individualize himself and manifest individualized, ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new bliss. And that's what every one of us are, aspects of divine, unmoving, eternal, watchful consciousness. We cannot die, we were never born. It's the part of you and me that says, I am, is actually God's higher aspect. I look in awe at His creation, and the more science discovers and the more we discover through our meditations and our practices, I'm in awe of the vastness and the creativity and the individual and the individuality and the uniqueness of creation. And Krishna says it's actually His lower aspect. You and me, the essence of every self-aware being is His higher aspect. I mean, that's a really an incredible statement. We need to realize the self, because that is God's highest form of creation. The Gita says, in fact, the indwelling self is ever changeless, imperishable, and without limitation. Same definition we would give God. The self is not born, it continues forever. It is birthless, eternal, changeless, and ever the same. That ever the same also is an interesting definition, because it is the watchful state. It will never be touched, was never born, will never die. It is blissful observer of its creation. That's what's behind everything, and that's what you and I, that's what we all are. The watchful state of eternal, blissful consciousness. The soul cannot even be pondered by the reasoning mind. So we shared these definitions, we share these concepts, but we don't even come close to understanding this individualized divinity of the soul, of the watchful state. Because we can't ponder it with the rational mind. It's an important point that needs to be emphasized. Through our meditation, we develop intuition. Even Einstein said we've developed a society that values the slave but forgot the gift. The slave is the rational mind, the gift is intuition. But he said we don't develop, we don't even acknowledge intuition. He said, I never made one of my discoveries through the rational mind. It's a quote from Einstein. He's a scientist. He's rational. He has to try to prove things mathematically. But he said, I never made one of my discoveries through the rational mind. Yes, I spent years trying to prove the flashes of intuition that I saw, but those discoveries came through intuition. Then Krishna says, the periods before birth and after death are veiled from your gaze. So it's nice to hear that we were never born and that we will never die. It's nice to consider that I am the eternal watchful state. it's also wonderful to consider that in this word, in this vibration, I can experience subtle realities of God's creation, not even imaginable to my awareness yet. That is the promise of Christ and these yogi Christs, is that you can experience ever finer levels. Yogananda said, I discovered that spirit is countless veils of, or tissues of God's light. That's what creation is. Countless tissues or levels of God's light. Tesla himself said, if you want to discover the secrets of the universe, we have to start to think in terms of vibration, energy, and frequency. It's all, according to the masters, simply vibrations of God's light. Blissful, incredibly ecstatic experiences await us in the light. So there is Christ in creation, and there is the Father behind creation. To perceive the Word, it is a good practice to feel yourself at the center of everything. Your thoughts, every movement, whether physical or mental, try to be at the center. Again, if we can just go behind, where is it that that thought comes from? Can I find that part of me? Doesn't associate with the thought, but actually is the eternal watchful state. I'm not these thoughts. I'm not this body. I'm not these ideas. I'm eternal watchful state. Concentrate on the stillness at the center of the breathing process. And that, my friends, is where we're so fortunate. Even our practice of Hong Sa, the masters teach, right at the center of the inhalation and the exhalation, we rest. That's behind the thought. Because once we calm the breath, we notice the thoughts begin to calm. We have the tools, and we just need to go deep with the tools. Right between the breath, sit. And the yogis teach, meditation teaches, the longer we sit without thought in the pause between the breaths, the longer those pauses become, breath begins to cease, and the light appears. That's the tools. We have the tools. We have the tools to feel and experience the Word of God. We have the tools to be immersed in the light of Spirit. Remember, and I know this is very difficult to even imagine, but Master said, we practice all of these techniques to prepare ourselves for the liberating shock of omnipresence. Because that's what God the Father is. And that's what the Christ at the heart of every atom is. Omnipresent. This is what Master tried to say. On the one side, God is dreaming, but he knows he's dreaming. He's in every single atom of his creation. Vast, seemingly infinite, the universe. God is omnipresent, meaning his existence exists simultaneously in every point of space. It's just as amusing to me that science has come up with this name, non-locality. And it means that there's a wholeness or an awareness behind the atoms that exists simultaneously in every point of space. So they call it, it's not local to one point, it's simultaneously existing. So non-locality is simply another definition, or once you define non-locality, is simply another word for omnipresent. But nevertheless, that's a huge step that we're taking for science to move toward the idea that everything is consciousness. There is a field of consciousness behind manifested creation. By dwelling on the thought of centeredness and stillness, you will become more aware of the inspiration that flows from Om. Centeredness and stillness. Because once we're that still, then the subtle sound of Om we begin to perceive. Master said actually you'll feel it, you can even feel it on the surface of your skin, but even more is that then that is the vehicle that allows your consciousness to be able to, or begin to expand into the light of spirit. That's our eternal home. That's the ecstasy. That's the ecstasy. St. Teresa of Avila said, when ecstasy comes, it's like a bullet from the base of the spine. You go up through that tunnel, you go into the light. It's yogic, it's Christian, it's Buddhist. It's the birthright of every single human being is for us to go into the stillness and realize our eternal nature. Really, it's almost impossible to talk this way except to fellow devotees or meditators, because I remember when I was new on this path, I remember thinking, well, why would I want to meditate on nothing? Or why would I want to meditate on stillness? How boring can that be? But in fact, the masters teach, in that stillness, once you shut off all the stimulation of this vibrating universe and go into the silence, then, like Yogananda said, a whole nother universe opens up to our inner gaze. And that's why these masters continue to come on earth and try to persuade us, try to nudge us along to realizing our true self as ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss, individualized. So, Happy New Year. That is the word that we want to try to perceive this year. We want to go in to cosmic consciousness, but we can't reach cosmic consciousness without first tuning into the word that St. John taught. The word is Christ, and Christ is God's intelligence in every atom of creation. And Jesus was the little human form in which the vast Christ consciousness was born. And Anand and Kirtani and everybody is the little human form in which potentially the vast Christ consciousness can be born. That is our spiritual heritage. God bless you all.